Okay, live now. Let us start. Okay. Where's the dashboard? Okay, that's. Where's the screen? It's supposed to show, or maybe it's coming just. No. Oh, okay, that's me. Where's this thing now? Okay, that's. Yeah, there we are. No, it's supposed to show the. I think I know why. Because I'm not linked to the. Need to sign in there. That's why. Okay. YouTube. Switch accounts. There we are. Okay, that's it.
Questions on WhatsApp. Steamer.
You online, huh? Okay, let's go.
Chapter 14.
That's what you sent. Okay. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Bharadhi Madhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Bharadhi Madhari Gopi Jana Bharadhi Madhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. We're very sorry for a small delay. This is actually not the right class that you just need to upload chapter 16 slides.
Did send the right one.
Yeah, I sent you the right one today. So today's class is all about Raganuga Bhakti and the different levels of how to actually elevate oneself in the process of Raganuga. The chapters that we have thus been going through so far actually we started off with rules and regulations. We had to go through such long lists, and there's a reason why Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada stressed all of that. Today's lesson clearly shows us exactly why this was possible. Why is it necessary for us as practitioners to take this seriously and to actually follow each and every one of them. Sometimes there's a tendency for us to think that we are in need of choosing, picking and choosing, because we may think, okay, some of the things are a bit too heavy, it's not really for me, etc. However, when we come to Krishna consciousness, and as we follow and mature, you will see that actually Krishna consciousness, the process of Krishna consciousness, is actually not really like a supermarket experience where one can pick and choose. Thank you so much. Where one can actually pick and choose. So let's repeat the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So let's chant the invocation prayers. Nana Shastra Vicharanai Kanipuno Sadharma Samstavako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanyakaro Radha Krishna Padaravinda Bhajana Nande Namataliko Vandera Sanatana Rago Yugo Shri Jiva Gopala Go. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the six Goswamis, namely Sri Sanatan Goswami, Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Raghunath Bhatta Goswami, Sri Raghunath Das Goswami, Sri Jiva Goswami, and Sri Gopal Bhatta Goswami, who are very expert in scrutinizingly studying all the revealed scriptures with the aim of establishing eternal religious principles for the benefit of all human beings. Thus, they are honored all over the world, all over the three worlds, and they are worth taking shelter of because they are absorbed in the mood of the gopis and are engaged in transcendental loving service of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. So, welcome to chapter 16, entitled Spontaneous Devotional Service, Further Explained. So, in the last class, about 4 weeks ago, we had been introduced to spontaneous devotional service. And this chapter is actually expanding on this subject matter a little more. In the Nectar of Devotion, we find that spontaneous love is found in the residence of Vrindavan, and it has two divisions: Karma Rupa, sensual attraction, and Sambandha Rupa, or relationship. So in chapter 15, we ended up with an analysis of Karma Rupa, which is the sensual attraction. Then in chapter 16, today's class begins with a brief analysis of Sambandha Rupa. So let's see what all of this really means. So Kama Rupa or sensual attraction is the intense attachment to serve in the mood of conjugal ras, or the mood of the gopis, the mood of a lover. Sambandha Rupa or relationship is the intense attachment to service in the mood of a parent, friend, or servant. So it's either Vatsalya Ras, Sakya Ras, or Dasya Ras. So they fall in these two different categories for the purpose of understanding in these sections of this illustrious book. So Srila Prabhupada explains both Kama Rupa and Sambandha Rupa describe the eternal residents of Vrindavan who possess the perfection of spontaneous devotion. So the residents of Vrindavan, they actually please Krishna in many different types of rasas. And the 5 primary rasas are hereby mentioned in this first slide that we just passed. The primary subjects of this chapters 15 and 16, however, is the practice of spontaneous devotion or Raganuga sadhana, not the perfection of spontaneous devotion, which is Ragatmika prema. So there's a difference. There's Raganuga sadhana and the Ragatmika prema. So therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami presents the subject of Ragatmika Bhakti only briefly. Srila Prabhupada says, in the stage of devotional service, where regulative principles are followed, there's no necessity of discussing this love, for it must develop of itself at a more advanced stage. So what Prabhupada is clarifying here is that the development of bhakti on these higher levels is actually not really textbook knowledge. It comes in a scientific process of following bhakti yoga as per the instructions of previous acharyas, like Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Prabhupada, and in actual fact, our entire parampara. So, Ragatmika Prema is that love of those residents of Vrindavan, and Raganuga Sadhana is a practice that we as sadhakas will engage in after following the rules and regulations diligently. Then we will develop this spontaneous attraction for Krishna and for serving Krishna. And Prabhupada explains that so nicely in this chapter. As we go through this chapter, we will have a clear realization of how everything Srila Prabhupada gave us is actually such a magnanimous gift. Every little rule and regulation, everything he stressed, from reading his books morning and evening to executing the services of deity worship, etc., chanting one's rounds, following the regulative principles. Everything has an ocean of benefit for the practitioner, and it's going to lead us into something so amazing. He wants to give us something so amazing at the end of all of this. But the only way that we can achieve that gift that he wants to hand over to us is by treading this path and following diligently as he says. As I was saying earlier, if you've just joined us, that Krishna consciousness, this process of bhakti yoga, is clearly no supermarket where one can pick and choose, because the systematic method in which we follow this Krishna consciousness is going to lead us to something so amazing, and you'll see just now. So this process of Raganuga Bhakti, spontaneous devotional service, is the practice of advanced devotees. So why is he saying advanced devotees? Because when in the earlier stages of our devotional understanding, when we're not so advanced, the rules and regulations are there because just like how Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, your senses can be controlled how? By regulating them. By regulation of the senses, one can gain ultimate control over them. And then Krishna goes on to explain how higher than the senses is the mind, and higher than the mind is one's intelligence, and higher than intelligence is actually the Atma or the soul. So when one comes to spontaneous devotional service, this platform of Raganuga Bhakti, in that advanced stage, one doesn't have to think about following the rules and regulations. One is not forced to follow these rules and regulations. There's no real extraneous endeavor. However, the need to follow it is comes by mature understanding and an affection to follow these rules and regulations. It's almost like it becomes a loving thing that is second nature to us. So what's the whole process? What's the need for this spontaneous service? It is intended to cultivate sentiments of a particular eternal devotee or Ragatmika Bhakta. So there are numerous ways to serve Krishna. There are some devotees who take their birth as creepers, and these creepers, what do? They form little groves for Radha and Krishna to perform their pastimes. Then there are others who take their birth as grass, and their life's purpose is to provide a cushioning for Krishna and Radha's and their associates' lotus feet as they traverse through Vrindavan. Then you get other categories of devotees who would probably would have the service of maybe decorating Srimati Radharani's lotus feet. Others who are specifically geared up and equipped with knowledge to make different types of outfits for Radha and Krishna that are extraordinary for their pleasure. So there are different services. So what happens is that there are groups of these eternal associates. So they have different departments, so to speak. And in these departments or groups, there are group leaders. And if one has an affinity to join a certain group, just say one hears about it, the purport, the Nectar of Devotion is going to take us through this path now of how we can cultivate the sentiments of a particular eternal devotee. So how is that going to happen? Basic qualifications to practice Raganuga Bhakti. The basic qualification for Raganuga Bhakti is simply a natural, spontaneous desire to serve Krishna in a specific relationship. So what's the qualification? It's natural, spontaneous desire. That's the only qualification. It must be natural. It's not enforced upon you. It's not that, okay, now you have, the process of giving up unnecessary things, of letting go of anarthas becomes so tedious that it actually holds us back because we're still attached. No, it's a time when all of this giving up things that are not favorable to Krishna becomes so natural that spontaneous desire to serve Krishna in a specific relationship becomes like becomes the foreground of our consciousness, and everything else just falls away. A desire that can be evoked by hearing about the eternal residence of Vrindavan. So this qualification for spontaneous devotion comes about how? By hearing. Just like if you hear about somebody beautiful who lives in another province, in another country, on another continent, then more than likely you'll meditate on the qualities of this person, become endeared to the person, and a desire is there to meet and associate with the person. So Srila Prabhupada says there's a gradual development of the ambition to become like the particular devotee, and this activity is called Raganuga. So we all grew up hearing stories, and there were heroes in the various stories, and we may have uh, made certain strides to emulate the behavior of whoever we chose to be the hero of our childhood. So similarly, as we hear this amazing subject matter of how Krishna reciprocates with his eternal associates, their mood of service, their actual service, etc., we may feel something deep within us that, oh, I want to carry Krishna on my shoulders, and I want to play tug of war with him, or I want to play this game with him, or perhaps, I want to serve him as a little child. I want to be able to put a rasgulla right into Krishna's mouth. I want to be Krishna's favorite, I want to be able to serve some of Krishna's favorite female residents, etc. So Prabhupada says in the Nectar of Devotion, we must always remember, however, that such eagerness to follow in the footsteps of the denizens of Vrindavan is not possible unless one is freed from material contamination. In following the regulative principles of devotional service, there's a stage called anartana vritti, which means the disappearance of all material contamination. Sometimes someone is found imitating such devotional love, but factually, he is not freed from anarthas or unwanted habits. It has been seen that a so-called devotee proclaims himself a follower of Nanda, Yasoda, or the gopis, while at the same time his abominable attraction for mundane sex life is visible. Such a manifestation of divine love is a mere imitation and has no value. When one is actually spontaneously attracted to the loving principles of the gopis, there will be found no trace of mundane contamination in his character. How often it is that we may hear or loosely use the term gopi in reference to a materially conditioned soul. It's not that if you simply dress up in Vaishnava attire, you're a gopi, or you look like a gopi because you dressed in Vaishnava attire, or a gopa, etc. No. Here Prabhupada is explaining that to cultivate the mood of a resident of Vrindavan requires that we come to the stage of anartana vritti. So in those 9 stages from Shraddha to Prema, Shraddha is initial faith. That's the first stage. Then Nishingananda Prabhu did a beautiful chart when he did, I think, one of the earlier chapters, and he explained this in detail. So Shraddha is the initial step, which is faith. Then we move to Sadhu Sangha. When we establish faith, then we develop an affinity to associate, to carry out the loving exchanges with devotees, to inquire from devotees, etc. Then from Sadhu Sangha, what do we do in Sadhu Sangha? We engage in bhajana kriya. That means we engage in hearing and chanting about the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We don't use Sadhu Sangha for any other activity. We use it for going closer to the goal, remembering Krishna. Then, after Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya is the stage of Anartana Vritti. So, at the stage of Anartana Vritti, one feels a natural inclination to give up all sinful actions. One knows, okay, as a devotee, if I want to be called a devotee, I must not engage in this, and this. It becomes natural. It's not that, okay, it's a forced thing. Naturally, because one has developed a higher taste in the association of devotees by bhajana kriya, then, and one's faith has become stronger, then these anarthas become you easily let go of them. If one is still under the platform of anartana vritti, then one is still on the bodily conception of life. And thereby, when one hears about the gopis, the Rasa Leela, and Krishna's association with his intimate associates, one's material attraction, one's material sense gratification becomes more prominent in one's consciousness, because it's like eating something that's so palatable, but your digestive system can't handle it. So Prabhupada is explaining there clearly that has to be the qualification, that one must be on the platform higher than anartana vritti. Now this anartana vritti, although on this stage, the stage after anartana vritti is nishta. So steadiness comes there. Where after nishta is a shakti or attachment, and then is bhava, and then is prema. Ruchi comes. Ruchi is just before bhava. Thank you. So what happens is anartana vritti, even though on the stage of anartana vritti, when one comes to the higher stage of nishta, then one has more than likely given up most of one's unwanted qualities. Anartas are unwanted qualities. When one has given that up, remnants of that unwanted qualities or material attachment, slight remnants of that, is still prevalent in these higher stages up unto the stage of bhava, up unto the stage of Krishna Prem. So we know the common story of Jad Bharat, and how even though he was on the stage of bhava, he became attached to his deer, and what happened? He had to take birth again. So up onto the stage of bhava, Prabhupada explains in the purports of that pastime, still some contamination can be there, residue of contamination. Then Prabhupada quotes the CC, Madhya Leela, chapter 22, text 155. When an advanced, realized devotee hears about the affairs of the devotees of Vrindavan in the mellows of Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Madhurya, he becomes inclined in this way, and his intelligence becomes attracted. Indeed, he begins to covet a particular type of devotion. When such covetousness is awakened, one's intelligence no longer depends on the instruction of Shastra, revealed scripture, logic, or argument. So now what happens? We started off following rules and regulations. We've cultivated devotion to a certain extent through sadhu sangha, bhajana kriya, and we've now given up unwanted qualities. We've reached nishta, a platform of steadiness. It's not that our enthusiasm for Krishna consciousness is up and down, up and down, up and down. No, we have some steady attraction. This Prabhupada is stressing, it comes about by hearing about the residents of Vrindavan. So when we hear about them in these different relationships with Krishna, and we develop some feeling deep within our Atma that I want to serve in this way. I wish I could actually help this personality, etc. And when that happens, the intelligence does not depend on instructions, because higher than intelligence, we said, is the Atma. So we're acting on the platform of the pure Atma and that stage. Then one point must be repeatedly stressed. Even though Prabhupada says that the Raganuga Bhakta, he does not act according to rules and regulations. His impetus to execute his service is his genuine love for the residents of Vrindavan and Krishna. That now some points here to remember about when one comes to that stage, that a Raganuga devotee is above the regulative principles, means that they do not depend on scriptural injunction for their inspiration to serve and surrender. So no one has to tell them, you must execute this as your prescribed service every day. No one tells them, you must rise early, take a bath, and be there in Brahma Muhurta hours to worship Krishna. The Raganuga Bhakta is already geared. Oh, when will it be time for me to go and worship Radha and Krishna? He runs up to perhaps Mangal Arti. And what does he see? He doesn't see, okay, this pujari is from America or India or Russia or whatever. He sees the arti of Radha and Krishna in a completely different light. That Lalita Devi stands on the side of Krishna, and she is performing the arti to the divine couple. And I am simply, the pujari is simply the assistant handing things to Lalita, because what bhakti do we have to offer to the divine couple? Then no one, like I said, no one has to force. They're not dependent on scriptural injunctions. Prabhupada says their inspiration comes from their own spontaneous affection. That, oh, let me run up and go see what Krishna needs. This does not mean that a Raganuga Bhakta does not follow the regulative principles. It means that their motivation is love, not just obligation. So what comes to mind is the story of a lady who was serving Lord Jagannath in Jagannath Puri. So in the winter time, she would wake up in the morning and she would think, oh, Lord Jagannath, he must be feeling so cold. I have to cook some hot khichdi for him. So she would cook hot khichdi and she'd put ghee in it. And then she would make a preparation of crushed leaves that was bitter. So to help the digestion of Lord Jagannath, in her estimation, who is being offered so many rich things, she would try to counteract his so-called digestive problems by offering something bitter. So the pujaris, some senior devotees that lived in her house, they were telling her, you actually have to follow this rule, that rule, etc., before you make this start to cook for Lord Jagannath. And what happened was actually Lord Jagannath appeared in the dream of the person who was trying to sort of tame this lady into the system of following the rules and regulations, and said, no, he wants that offering from her. Thus, every day they started to introduce that as a regular offering for Jagannath because he wanted it. She understood his need. How come? Not because it was a rule or a regulation or a prescribed service, but out of her natural love for him. So, how does one actually become qualified for Raganuga Bhakti? It's such a glorious position. It seems to be filled with so much of spontaneous love. There's no rules and regulations, means there's no pain in suffering, no force in executing this. It's a very admirable stage to come to. The basic qualification for Raganuga Bhakti is simply eagerness, lobha, to achieve the service of a particular Ragatmika devotee. But this eagerness is not cheap or easy to come by. So the most important thing is lobha, greed, enthusiasm. The qualification of any devotee to execute devotional service is enthusiasm. I remember in Hillbrow, when they wanted a temple president, they asked a very young devotee to take the position. They asked Sringananda Prabhu to take the position. And he was very young. He just entered his 20s, perhaps. And there were many senior devotees there, but the GBC told them when they were asked how come they chose such a young person, they said his qualification is that he's enthusiastic. So this enthusiasm for service, a great eagerness, is such a nice criteria to have. Actually, I was listening to a lecture of one of my spiritual mentors this morning, and he was saying how sometimes when he travels to different centers, they oftentimes ask him, how do you find the progress the Hare Krishna movement today compared to when you serve Prabhupada on a personal capacity. And he was saying that he finds that one cannot judge the progress of Krishna consciousness by how many big buildings we have, how many devotees we have in the room, or by how many fixed assets we have, acres of land, etc. He said the way one can judge is by the enthusiasm of the devotees. Are the devotees being enthused? Have they been stimulated to come up to this level of great lobha, of Raganuga Bhakti? So, and it's true. I find it to be so true, because this eagerness, as Prabhupada said, it's not cheap or easy to come by. We find those devotees who practice over the years, it's natural for them. They may not want to buy a television. They may not want to get entangled spontaneously. No one has to walk into their house and tell them, no, don't do this, don't do that, don't do that, you don't do that. Naturally, they've developed a higher taste and they give up the lower tastes. So this lobha, or intense covetedness, refers to the state where one's sole and overwhelming desire is to please Krishna in a particular way. So the devotional service in this level is now come to a level of being decisive. One understands that I would like to perhaps help in the kitchen, right? There are some devotees that I know of who for like 20 years will be completely happy to simply do a backup service in the kitchen. They'd wash the pots, they come every day, every weekend to the temple, and immediately they run to that particular service. At least when we were living in the ashram, there were devotees like that. I hope there are still like that in whichever temple you're going to. But that, they would hear the classes and they would hear how the kitchen is the abode of Srimati Radharani. And who cooks for Krishna? Srimati Radharani. What do we do in the kitchen? We're simply assisting Srimati Radharani. In your kitchen at home, in the kitchen in the temple, in the deity kitchen, or whichever kitchen, Srimati Radharani is the chief cook and I'm simply the assistant. Should be the best mentality to imbibe. As long as there's some other desire in one's heart, the required intensity of focus cannot manifest. So if there's some other desire for self-interest in the heart, then this spontaneity will not manifest itself. So all anarthas have to be given up. Achieving qualification for Raganuga Bhakti further explained. Therefore, generally, lobha cannot awaken until the devotee achieves steadiness in the completion of anartana vritti. So, Srila Prabhupada used to oftentimes say, he's waiting for the day when the devotees will come up to the level of being like Sri Rupa and Sanatan Goswamis. Right? It was his aim, his desire that this mission that he has started, that he has brought and delivered to the Western people and taken back to India, is the means by which a soul could actually become unconditioned from all of the conditioning in the material world, embrace the process of Nam Bhajan, and experience this cleansing of the heart, this Cheto Darpana Marjanam, and come up to this level of spontaneity. Then it's less stress on any authority. No prefecting is needed because the devotees are now elevated to this consciousness. And indeed, how nice it is when we meet devotees of this caliber and to associate with them. Everything is so natural. You don't have to spend energy and time discussing inferior subject matters. You can immediately start discussing things of higher nature. Very relishable. After having thoroughly heard Srimad Bhagavatam and being freed from all unwanted desires, Generally, it is only then that one possesses the qualification to practice genuine Raganuga Bhakti. Now, here we see, even though this statement appears so simplistic, Srila Prabhupada instituted this hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam on a daily basis. He wanted the devotees to hear the Srimad Bhagavatam. Out of all the services Prabhupada could have chosen, out of the 9 different types of serving, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu Smaranam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, Atma Nivedanam, etc., Atma Nivedam, these 9 types of devotional service, what did Prabhupada choose? He chose to give his last moments of good health with such urgency in translating the Srimad Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada, one time, he was in France, and a man came to him, a professor. So he, out of respect, when he came to meet Srila Prabhupada, he came with his dressed in a dhoti. He went and he asked some devotees how to tie the dhoti. They put him in a dhoti, and then his 16-year-old daughter came with him to meet Srila Prabhupada, and she was dressed up in a sari. So he came before Srila Prabhupada. Now, he wasn't a practicing devotee, but he dressed up as a devotee to meet Srila Prabhupada. So when he came in front of Srila Prabhupada, then he was telling Srila Prabhupada, the French, it was glorifying Srila Prabhupada. He was a professor, so he's glorifying Srila Prabhupada for writing the commentary or the purports to the Srimad Bhagavatam. And he was saying that it would be so nice to have the purports in French language. And then he was saying how the French language is such a sophisticated language that the scholars on the higher ranking scholars, they will not appreciate this work if proper French translation is not done. That means if some unqualified, so within inverted commas, simple devotee in the temple has to do it, it may not meet the standard of the scholars. But Srila Prabhupada kept stressing to him the qualification to translate the books into French is that one has to be on the Brahmanical platform, following the rules and regulations and executing devotional service on a pure level. So it's really incredible how Prabhupada, he didn't want just this man to come and take the service just for his name, fame, his own aggrandizement. He wanted the person to first become a devotee before he embarked on, he handed him such a service. Why? Because the hearing of the Srimad Bhagavatam must be from a Mahabhagavat. And if one does this, if one hears the Bhagavatam in a pure manner like this, then this Raganuga Bhakti starts to rise from the depths of our own Atma. Awakening takes place. Nectar of Instruction, Text 8 Purport is quoted here. There, Srila Prabhupada translates Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. In the transcendental realm of Rajadam, one should serve the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna with a feeling similar to that of his associates. One should place himself under the direct guidance of a particular associate of Krishna and should follow in his footsteps. This method is applicable both in the method of sadhana, spiritual practices executed while in the stage of bondage, and in the stage of sadhya, God realization, when one is a siddha purush or spiritually perfected soul. Very clearly, Prabhupada is explaining that one cannot go directly to Krishna. One has to serve under an eternal associate of Krishna. One time, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj was told that there's a very nice Paramahamsa in the region. And this Paramahamsa, he has a very great devotion for Lord Ramachandra. And he asked, so then when the devotees came and they were telling Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj about this person, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj asked them to go back to the man and ask him one question. Ask him if his relationship with Krishna is direct, or is it through an associate of Lord Ramachandra? And when they asked him, the answer came back to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. No, my relationship with Lord Ram is direct. So they didn't have this parampara. We, however, through the illustrious connection of Srila Prabhupada, we have a link to so many intimate servants of Sri Sri Radha and Krishna. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta is Nayana Mani Manjari. Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj is Guna Manjari. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur is Kamala Manjari. Rupa Goswami is Rupa Manjari. So the pure devotee we'll hear just now can be on two platforms simultaneously, or many platforms simultaneously. So we find in our illustrious lineage, one time they asked Srila Prabhupada who he is in the spiritual world, and he said, if I tell you, you'll fall on your back. So at the given time, when we're pure enough, it will also be revealed to us who Srila Prabhupada is. But if he's the eternal servant of Nayana Mani Manjari, it gives us a great indication. In the class that I gave on Radha Astami Day, then I had a nice presentation where I showed a quotation from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, and how he said that in the Gaudiya lineage, as Gaudiyas, this linking through this very intimate service of manjaris is very prominent in our illustrious lineage. So cultivating attachment to hear from Srila Prabhupada and our predecessor Acharyas is absolutely imperative. Why? Because somewhere along the line, we're going to meet them in their eternal positions, and we're going to serve under them, right? They'll be our group leader. Then that doesn't mean that, what would be the position of whoever you're taking shiksha in this, whoever's leading you in this world. That personality will also be there, because why? We're all das, anadas, anadas, anadas. So Prabhupada said we'll have another ISKCON in the spiritual world, completely pure in understanding and service to Radha and Krishna. The advanced devotee who is inclined to spontaneous loving service should follow the activities of a particular associate of Krishna in Vrindavan. He should execute service externally as a regular devotee, as well as internally from his self-realized position. Thus, he should perform devotional service both externally and internally. Very important point. Prabhupada is stressing, when you're on the platform of spontaneity, you don't proclaim it to the world, here, oh, here, I have now reached this stage. Thereby, I am not going to be following the rules and regulations anymore. There's never a situation where that will happen to a sadhaka. The sadhaka becomes more and more humble and externally performs the rules and regulations of regulative devotional service, but he's doing it out of love. But internally, his mood is very different, as Prabhupada quotes from the C.C. Madhya Leela in this part of the presentation. So, from Nectar of Devotion. So, Srila Prabhupada, he had an internal mood and an external mood also. All of the devotees had, in our lineage, had that mood. I wanted, what comes to mind is a pastime that I told also recently on the Sri Radha Astami, on the occasion of Sri Radha Astami. It was of Radharani giving mercy to Srinivas Acharya. So Srinivas Acharya, you may have heard, is one of the three persons who were in the first Sankirtan team started by Lord Nityananda. So Lord Nityananda gave the service of distribution of Jiva Doya, of distributing Krishna consciousness to the conditioned souls to Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das Thakur, and who was the third person? I forget. Can you have, anyone knows? Anyhow, Srinivasacharya, he was actually Haridas Thakur. No, not Haridas Thakur. Haridas Thakur was the Sankirtan partner of Lord Nityananda, right? So Srinivasacharya, Narottam Das, and I forget the third name. You're looking it up just now for me. Srinivasacharya, he used to practice his chanting so sincerely on such a pure level that one day he sat down to chant, and he went into this deep meditation. This is now in a perfected stage, right? He went into this deep meditation, eyes closed, sitting down. It was lunchtime. He didn't finish his rounds yet at lunchtime, even though he started so early. So his two wives, they came and they were saying, "What happened? We cooked already. He's still busy with his sadhana." So they were waiting for him to finish. It came to afternoon. He was still sitting in the same, Shamananda. So it was Narottam Das Thakur, Shamananda Pandit, and Srinivas Acharya that were the first Sankirtan team that Lord Nityananda had started. So what happened was Srinivas Acharya sat all through the night in his meditation, unbroken. The second day, the same thing happened. So the wives got really worried, and he was not showing any signs of external consciousness. He was in such deep meditation. So they called Ramachandra Kaviraj, who was actually his chief disciple, and they said to him, "Look, you got to tell your Guru Maharaj that he must now come and take prasadam. We're ready and we're waiting. We've not eaten also, and his body will become weak if he doesn't eat." So Ramachandra, he went and he sat next to his guru, and then he started chanting because he thought, okay, his guru will hear that. But by the potency and association of this pure personality, his Guru Maharaj Srinivasacharya, he also became transported into deep meditation. So instead of him, so he now found his consciousness, being able to witness some manjaris. He saw Radha and Krishna, he saw Radharani with her sakis, and then on the banks of Radha Kund, he could see some manjaris, and they were looking very worriedly and pointing and saying something about the Kund, Radha Kund. So then he went up to the manjaris, and he asked them, and he, of course, in that dream or in that state of consciousness, he had a different body, right? It was the same person, but somehow his body was in a Saki form, in a Manjari form, in a female form. So he went up, and the Manjaris, they told him that that Mani Manjari, Ramachandra was Karuna Manjari in his form now in this spiritual realm, and his guru Srinivasacharya was Mani Manjari. So they told him that Mani Manjari has been looking for Srimati Radharani's nose ring. A most favorite nose ring has been lost in this kund while they were executing some water pastimes. So he went and did that service. He's undertaken the service of relocating it for the pleasure of Srimati Radharani. So Kasturi Manjari, Karuna Manjari, thought, if my superior is doing the service, hey, I'm not going to stand back. I'm going to dive into and help and get some mercy. So she dived in, and within half an hour located the nose ring, looked everywhere, located the nose ring. But what did she do? She took the nose ring and she gave it to Mani Manjari. Mani Manjari took the nose ring and gave it to Srila Rupa Manjari. Rupa Manjari then takes that nose ring and presents it to Srimati Radharani, who then becomes exceptionally pleased by this act, and she gives, as a token of appreciation, what she had with her then and then was some beetle that she was chewing. So she took out some chewed beetle and she gave it to Rupa Manjari, who then took it and gave it to Mani Manjari, who didn't keep it all for himself, took a little and then gave the rest to Karuna Manjari. And then what happened was that they they went back into their male forms, and they came out of their meditation and happily were served by the wives who were in deep anxiety. So the next day they asked Ramachandra, what happened? We thought you were going to help the situation. What was the? So you see, the betel nut was tied in the sari. When Karuna Manjari got the beetle, she took a little and she tied the rest in her sari. When she came back into her body, she found that that scent was so overwhelming, and she looked. She was now wearing She was now a he wearing a dhoti, and in the dhoti there was a knot, and the smell was coming out from that knot, and that was the beetle from Srimati Radharani's lotus mouth. So then she then distributed it, because Srimati Radharani's mood is, the more people you spread the mercy to, the happier Srimati Radharani becomes. She is not happy to just be the one giving pleasure to Krishna, but she's happier when she can push all others towards Krishna. That's a great humility. So that pastime I thought of telling you was to illustrate this point of how a Raganuga Bhakta is internally and externally engaged in devotional service. So there's so many pastimes we can tell you like this of Shamananda Pandit, etc. But for the purpose of time, I'm not going to tell you. If we have time at the end, I'll tell you. A devotee who is actually advanced in Krishna consciousness, who is constantly engaged in devotional service, should not manifest himself even though he has attained perfection. The idea is that he should always continue to act as a neophyte devotee as long as this material body is there. Activities in devotional service under regulative principles must be followed even by pure devotees. But when he realizes his actual position in relationship with the Lord, he can, along with discharging the regulative service, think within himself of the Lord under the guidance of a particular associate of the Lord, and develop his transcendental sentiments in following that associate. So he does not advertise his perfection. He, the story of Madhavendra Puri? Excuse me. Madhavendra Puri, when the Lord had saved the sweet rice for him and come in the dream of the pujari and said that this sweet rice I saved for my dear servant Madhavendra Puri. And Madhavendra Puri by that time was feeling very guilty that he had meditated on enjoying that sweet rice. He was not in the mood of enjoying it for himself. He thought when he went to the temple of Shirachura Gopinath, he said, hey, Gopinath, all over Bharat, this sweet rice of yours has gained a reputation of being the topmost sweet rice. I wish I could taste just a little of it so that I could cook the same thing for you at Govardhan. But when he thought like that, he was thinking, oh, it's not even offered and I'm thinking like that. So he ran away to the marketplace and he was chanting, sort of incognito. And then the pujari came to the marketplace and says, who is Madhavendra Puri? Who is that great soul Madhavendra Puri? Because Gopinath has saved him this sweet rice. Madhavendra Puri, he showed up to receive the sweet rice from the pujari, but very quickly he again sort of blended himself into the crowd and disappeared. He didn't want any glorification for his status that, oh, Krishna is thinking of you, because out of that loving reciprocation, you must be a very great devotee. No. So the sentiment of higher understanding is very clearly put here in Nectar of Devotion by Prabhupada, that one does not advertise it. How often it is that we see religious institutions being started and propagated and led by people who would dress up like Krishna and call themselves perhaps Bal Krishna or this name or that name, giving themselves a title they'll get a consort eventually, and they'll say that she is an incarnation of Radha. We find this so prominent in Kali Yuga that this happens. But when we become educated in these scriptures in our pure disciplic chain, then we realize that those types of behavior is actually not bona fide. We should first note that the residents of Vrindavan simultaneously exist in two manifestations, sadhakas and siddhas. You remember Prabhupada said, we don't stop the practice of devotional service, we continue externally, but internally the mood is little different. For example, Srila Rupa simultaneously exists in Gaur Leela as Srila Rupa Goswami Sadhaka and in Krishna Leela as Rupa Manjari. So as we were saying earlier, a pure devotee can be in more than one place at the same time. Since the residents of Raj have two manifestations, there are two ways to meditate upon them. The first is externally and the second is internally. And this was so much exemplified in the life and teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that internally he was in a mood of great separation, like the gopis from Krishna, but externally he was in the dress of a sannyasi, chanting in Harinam in front of the chariot of Jagannath and behind the chariot, etc. So Prabhupada explains here a very important thing. After educating us about this Raganuga Bhakti, the qualifications for it, the symptoms of it, and how to behave when this is awakened within one after the serious and dedicated practice of sadhana, then Prabhupada explains, he warns us to be careful of so-called Siddha Pranali process. This process is based on an interpretation of current shloka in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu that is deviant in two ways. The first deviation is to prematurely imagine one's eternal perfect spiritual forms, Siddha Rup. Srila Prabhupada says they imagine that they become associates of the Lord simply by thinking of themselves like that. According to the Acharyas, realization of one's Siddha Rupa develops gradually by the purified desire of the heart. So there's a common thing in certain parts of India especially, that you could go to some supposed Mahabhagavat, and he is so advanced that he would see you not as a man or a lady or an infant. By dint of his purity, he'd be able to tell you who you are in the spiritual world. So in Srila Prabhupada's time, this happened to some devotees, and they went to him, and he told the male devotee, you're a peacock in the spiritual world. So the devotee started to practice like calling out like a peacock and dancing like a peacock, etc. But this is completely bogus. It's completely inconsistent with what Prabhupada has and Srila Rupa Goswami has educated us here about. Internally, you may be the peacock, right? Offering your best feathers to Krishna, doing your best dances in this for the pleasure of Krishna, etc., etc., etc. But internally, you're still part of, externally, you still execute your services as a regular devotee. The second deviation is their proposal. Their proposal that the word Vrajaloka, residents of Vrindavan, refers exclusively to the residents of Vrindavan in Krishna Leela, such as Srila Rupa Manjari, and not the residents of Vrindavan in the Gaura Leela, such as Rupa Goswami. Thus, they wrongly interpret Sevaka Sadhaka Rupena, Siddha Rupena Chatrahi, to mean that one should imitate the activities of a gopi both in one's external sadhana and internal meditation. One can see such men dressed in saris, jewelry, etc., not worshipping Guru or Tulasi, and making a show of imitating the behavior of the gopis, even though they are not yet purified of basic material desires. Srila Prabhupada succinctly states their external behavior is not at all according to the regulative principles. So even though they externally they externally appear as men, they are now artificially assuming the role of a lady, a manjari, or a gopi. And this is completely inconsistent with Srila Prabhupada and Rupa Goswami's teachings. And Prabhupada says the other thing is they only accept Srila Rupa Goswami as Rupa Manjari. They don't accept that in the spiritual world there's a division of Navadvip Dham with Gauranga Mahaprabhu and his associates, and then there's Radha Krishna and the gopis and sakis. So they feel that Goloka Vrindavan is only with Radha Krishna, the sakis, and the manjaris, and thereby they do not recognize Rupa Goswami as being the same person, Rupa Manjari. So that is their defect, and thereby you get many people. If you walk around Radha Kund, people approach you and they tell you that come and see so and this is the situation. They will be able to reveal to you your Siddha Pranali. There are two categories of Raganuga Bhakti. Kamanuga is devotional practice that strives for the mood of Kamarupa Ragatmikas, the gopis or the queens of Dwarika, and Sambandhanuga is the devotional practice that strives for the mood of Sambandha Rupa Ragatmikas, or the devotees of Vrindavan in parental friendly or servile love. So this was in an earlier slide right at the beginning, and now we're gonna Srila Prabhupada is gonna explain these two categories a little more for some clarification. So in conjugal love, or in the situation of Kamanuga, the Nectar of Devotion begins to describe Kamanuga Sadhana Bhakti on page 127 as at the subheading Conjugal Love. There are two divisions of Kamanuga: Sambhoga Ichchami, striving to serve Krishna, as do those who directly meet him in conjugal love. That's one. And two, and the second one is Tatat Bhava Ichatmika, striving not to directly meet with Krishna, but to assist the supreme heroine Srimati Radharani, and thus directly experience her loving mood through service and appreciation. So there are two options that one has: to try to become a direct servant of Krishna, and the other one to become the servant of the servant of the servant of the servant of Srimati Radharani. Which is better? One gradually becomes eligible for Kamanuga Sadhana Bhakti by developing a natural attraction to serving Krishna in conjugal love. One achieves this mainly by worshipping the deities of Radha and Krishna and hearing Krishna's pastimes with the gopis. It's a process that is not foreign to us, but Prabhupada has instituted it all over the world, right? That there are deities, you can get deities at home, and you can worship them and constantly hear the Srimad Bhagavatam and the books of the previous acharyas, or read them scrutinizingly. Srila Prabhupada explains this development of conjugal love can be possible only with those who are already engaged in following the regular principles of devotional service, specifically in worship of Radha and Krishna in the temple. Such devotees gradually develop a spontaneous love for the deity, and by hearing of the Lord's exchange of loving affairs with the gopis, they gradually become attracted to these pastimes. So every time one attends the 7 o'clock arti and one hears the prayers, one understands the meaning of those prayers, one attends the Raj Bhoga arti or executes the Raj Bhoga arti, and one understands the meanings of that prayers. And then one reads, after one completes the Srimad Bhagavatam, the CC, one reads the books that Prabhupada will then list in the Chaitanya Charitamrita of the Goswamis that we should read. And when we go into those books, then we find that there's an incredible sort of recipe given to us on how to look at deity worship, at the worship, any worship we are doing in a higher light. And that will fan that enthusiasm within us of Raganuga Bhakti. It comes from serving in the association of common-minded people who are also Raganuga on that platform. Since conjugal love, the eligibility in males, so are men allowed in the spiritual world to serve Krishna? Will they come into this category of serving? Now, let's see if there's scope. Such conjugal love of Krishna entails feminine sentiments on behalf of the devotee. One may have the impression only females can properly aspire for it. To dispel this misconception and establish that our transcendental relationship with Krishna has nothing to do with the material body, Srila Rupa Goswami cites the sages of Dandekaranya. So Dandekaranya is that forest where Lord Ramachandra had to traverse through. Although they were all men, when they saw Lord Ramachandra, their conjugal love for Krishna blossomed. They took their next birth as daughters of the gopis and got direct association of Lord Krishna. So when the sages of Dandekaranya, when they saw Lord Ramachandra's beautiful form, they became so attracted. But what attraction was it? Was love for Krishna. Why? Because they knew that when Lord Ram had come, he had taken Ekapatni Vrat. And Ekapatni Vrat meant that there was no room to have this type of relationship or servitude towards him in this rasa. They knew that next time he's coming as Krishna. They were learned enough to know that. And thereby, their desire was that we would like to take our birth strategically so that we can serve. Thus, they took their birth. And when Krishna performed the Maharas Leela with all of the gopis of Vrindavan, then even these sages of Dandekaranya in the form of gopis got to fulfill that desire and take part in that ras. So we know that Narad Muni, when he wanted to enter Vraja Leela, he had to give up his male form and become Naradi. When Arjuna wanted to enter into that section of pastimes, Krishna allowed him to become what he became? Aruni. He had to take on a female form. So it's not based on this material body, this conception of the material body. Here he says that relationship with Krishna has nothing to do with the material body. So it's the state of consciousness. The Atma awakens. And the Atma at that stage understands I'm not the body. Therefore, the anartana vritti stage is null and becomes insignificant, right? It's because It's not in relationship to the body anymore. It's in relationship to eternal service in the mood, in a particular mood. There are two moods in conjugal love: parikia, unwedded, and swakiya, wedded. So in this rasa of a female companion of Krishna, you can either be married to Krishna or you can be his paramour. So in the material world, a paramour relationship is actually degraded. Is it not? So what's highest in the spiritual world is a perversion, it's the tree standing on a bank. The highest part of the tree becomes the lowest part in the reflection. So what's highest in the spiritual world is the lowest in the material world. So in the spiritual world, in Parakiya Rasa, this paramour relationship, the gopis, they take their birth. They have husbands who are all actually expansions of Krishna's shadow. But to increase the rasa, or the level of devotion, they're now sort of bound at home. But when they hear Krishna play the fifth note on his flute, it's a calling. It draws them that they immediately now want to leave everything and run to Krishna. So that love for Krishna is so unconditional to any external circumstance. Thereby, it is the topmost, that not even Krishna can reciprocate with it. In the songs of the gopis, Tavakatamritam Tapsa Jivanam, in the Bhagavatam, in that section, you'll find Krishna explaining to them after he hears their glorification that he cannot reciprocate with them. Let their own glories, be their reciprocation, their own glorious service. Parikiya is practiced by those who follow in the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan. One who perfects this sentiment will be elevated to Goloka Vrindavan to associate with the gopis and enjoy loving affairs with Krishna there. The other one, Swakiya, is practiced by those who follow in the footsteps of Krishna's wedded wives in Dwarika. One who perfects this sentiment will be elevated to Dwarika, where the devotees become the queen of the Lord. The reference from the Mahakurma Purana is the example of this. However, we know that when Krishna is sleeping in Rukmini's palace, what is happening? In his dream, he starts to talk in his sleep. And what is he calling? Radha, 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 Gopi, Gopi, right? Because his sentiment, he's more attracted to the sentiment of the Raja Gopis, which is so much on a higher level and more attractive to him. So, as in our lineage, we are more inclined to follow, not direct, trying to establish a direct line with Krishna, but a lineage through Srimati Radharani. Srila Prabhupada explains in the development of becoming either the father or friend. Now we're going into Sambandha Nuga, parenthood or friendship. Srila Prabhupada explains in development of becoming either the father or friend of the Lord, there are two varieties. And it's just like in the previous instance of conjugal love. So when one is trying to establish parental love, one method is that one may try to become the father of the Lord directly, and the other is that one may follow Nanda Maharaj and cherish the ideal of being Krishna's father. So when one is following, just in this instant, Nanda Maharaj, or in the other instant, the gopis or Srimati Radharani, the other servants of Srimati Radharani, then one gets equal pleasure. It's like, just say, the service of decorating Srimati Radharani's feet. So in order to do that service, then one has to be educated in which herbs I must get and to crush to get a certain color, and must be crushed in a certain way, maybe with the addition of a certain substance for the certain circumstance. A camphor, perhaps, if it's too hot, right? Then one will crush those leaves, one will get a quill of a peacock feather, and then one will bring it to a certain consistency. The bring the paste to a certain consistency, and then one will decorate. But the position of the decorator is taken. But the person, however many millions of people are in that group desiring that service, they get, all of them get the same feeling of satisfaction when Radharani's feet is decorated by the frontline person. So it's not that, okay, if I'm not directly doing it, I will experience less happiness. No, in that group, it becomes, um, in that group, that feeling becomes shared by everybody. So if you're helping Mother Yasoda, like Danista helps Mother Yasoda. She's a gopi who's very inclined towards Krishna. So she helps Mother Yasoda to tie the lunch for Krishna every day. So if you're in that group, your assistance to Danista will bring you the same amount of pleasure as she is getting, or Mother Yasoda is getting in that particular service. Srila Rupa Goswami warns of the danger of the aspiring for direct relationship, especially concerning parenthood. In desiring to directly become the father of Krishna, one may inadvertently develop the desire to become Nanda Maharaj himself. This is no less Mayavad than desiring to be Krishna. If one becomes contaminated by such Mayavad implications, whatever advancement he has made is obliterated. So the positions, Krishna has eternal associates. Mother Yasoda and Nanda, they're eternal associates. One can't think that one will replace them. In fact, even though they are in that position, do you know when Putana entered Vrindavan, when she made her grand entrance and she met baby Krishna, Mother Yasoda, in her humility, was thinking, just look at this divine woman. She is expressing so much devotion towards Lord Krishna, more than I have. So Mother Yasoda didn't think that, oh, I have more love for Krishna than this lady. No. Mother Yasoda was thinking in her pure devotion. Now we can understand why she has that position. Nobody else has it, because a consciousness is so pure. There's no tinge of pride where she thinks she's the most qualified. She's always thinking everyone else is cooking better yoga. That's why Krishna is going to steal it. I must make extra endeavor. That's why in the Damodar Leela we hear how she planted grass with her own hand, scented grass. She took 8 select cows of the 900,000 that Nanda Maharaj has, and she selected those cows and made them graze on that scented grass so that the quality of their milk will be flavored milk, and she'll be able to make a higher quality yogurt for Krishna. So her consciousness, is always open to learning from others. Thereby, it's very, very pure. So when one is tainted with the desire to either replace Nanda Maharaj or Mother Yasoda, then one's advancement becomes obliterated, because that is stimulated by some ego, false ego. And the second to last slide. Srila Rupa Goswami gives an example of Sambandhanuga Sadhana Bhakti. In the Skanda Purana, there's a story of an old man residing in Hastinapur, the capital of the kingdom of the Pandus, who desired Krishna as his beloved son. This old man was instructed by Narad to follow in the footsteps of Nanda Maharaj, and thus he achieved success. So when one cultivates the devotion under the direction of a superior, like in this case, Narad Muni was his advisor, and he achieved perfection, he achieved success. So that is the system that one needs to adopt. And in conclusion, Srila Rupa Goswami closes the discussion of Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti by mentioning that some people in the Vallabha Sampradaya use the term Pusti Marg, or indicate Raganuga sadhana, to indicate Raganuga sadhana. Srila Prabhupada says, this process of devotional service is sometimes called Pusti Marg. So Prabhupada explains in the Nectar of Devotion that this is prominent in the state of Gujarat, where they worship Bal Krishna in this mood of parental affection. And this process they call as Pusti Marg, but it's the same thing that Rupa Goswami is referring here to as Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. Do we have any questions, comments, or corrections? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Glories to Srila Prabhupada. Shri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi. Hari Hari.